All right, it is that time once again. NFL Showdown live before lock, Thursday night football. Obviously, I am not Lofty. I am Ben Raza, and I am joined, as I always am, each and every Thursday by Alex Awesemo Baker, and making his debut on the show, our first show together, Neil Orfield. Neil, I got to start with you. It is our first show. I hope you're excited to join the Thursday night football. You are the official replacement for Lofty tonight.
Yeah, I'm excited to be on a show with you guys. I did Thursday night football up until a few weeks ago when basketball came in. So it's not my first Thursday night show, but it is my first show with you two. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Very cool. Alex, I know me and Neil were talking before the show. We got a lot of questions for you outside of the game. We're going to talk about the game, of course. But we also have questions about your debut as a television star, your outrageous prop bets that have been littering my Twitter. How are you tonight?
What's up, guys? Yeah, I've been trying to have a little bit of fun, and what's more fun than trying to win $1 million? A lot harder to do on a one game night than 13 games. So I have to come up with a unique lineup out of 130,000 people and then bink it. We're gonna do our best, but that's not. I think I took my chances with the parlay.
Yeah, you did have the old 13 player prop last night, but you know what? It is true. This is showdown season. A lot of money, and I'm talking to two people who have done it before. Big time payouts. We're going to try to do that here, and we're going to start as we always do with showdown strategy. So Neil, I want to go to you. Obviously, you're a former Millie winner. You just crushed a showdown earlier this year. What do you look for in showdown? Is there any macro rules that you kind of go into, or do you approach each slate saying this is two different teams and a totally different philosophy?
Yeah, I'd say I do. I play it a little bit differently depending on the slate. Every slate, I'd say macro, the biggest thing I'm trying to do is get unique without, giving up my chances of winning. So I'm trying to make lineups that are not going to be duped 50 times or more. Ideally that aren't duped at all, but that's kind of wishful thinking a lot of the time. So I go into it just trying to make lineups that are unique and still look good. Like I still look at them and think this lineup has a chance to win. And sometimes I'm using Fantasy Cruncher, and sometimes I still screw up and I look at a couple lineups here and there after that. I'm like, man, that quarterback really was not going to do anything without his pass catcher. So maybe I screwed up there. But for the most part, I feel like I feel good about my lineups when I'm done crunching. So that's on a macro level. That's what I'm trying to do.
No, it totally makes sense. Obviously, we've seen backup quarterbacks are taking things down these days. You obviously want to straddle that line between different and clinically insane. Alex, I want to ask you this, though. I feel like when Lamar is on a slate, it's almost a different game altogether because he's so different. And of course, we're going to break down his price in full. But, going into just general showdown strategy, when you see the Ravens pop up, is that something that you say, okay, this is kind of a different situation tonight?
Definitely, yeah, because Lamar has such an overwhelmingly high chance of being the top scoring player that's a huge factor. I think my big advice is you got to play the right strategy for the specific tournament that you're building the lineup for, because the lineups I'm entering in a Millie Maker versus like a 5,000 person field look a lot different. Like in a Millie Maker, my go-to strategy is probably leaving a lot of money on the table, anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 if I think the lineup has a shot in hell to be the top scoring lineup. One easy way to do that is stacking up 5 players from one team and then just hoping the top price guys on the other team don't do well. So I have some Miami stacks, some Baltimore stacks tonight. But in a more limited field, just playing the full salary cap and just trying to get a little bit unique is a better strategy.
Yeah, Neil, before we dive into Dolphins here, I kind of wanted to ask that same point to you about money on the table. I assume that when you're crunching or making that many lineups, you're more than willing to say, I'm going to leave a lot of money on the table in some of these just because the dupe factor is certainly going to be mitigated.
Yep, and that is the biggest way that I get different. I set a rule in Fantasy Cruncher. Depends on the slate. Each slate is different. Some days I leave more money on the table than others, but I'm never using the full salary cap. And that's something that I've been kind of studying pros and how pros play showdown in particular. And I'm surprised how few of them do that. But pros are able to find many different ways to get unique just with construction and different players and stuff. So it's fascinating trying to study what other people are doing. But that is the biggest way that I think that I try to get different, is just leaving salary on the table.
Totally makes sense. All right, let's get into it. Let's get to the Dolphins. Before I do, though, I will say I know that I'm not Josh or Lofty in the likes department. So we're not going to be hitting 2,000 likes. Let's not get crazy. But I'm going to ask for some likes. Support the show. Obviously, if you are not subscribed, hit the notification bell. It really helps us out. Supports the Thursday Night Football crew. But let's dive in. The Dolphins are the home team. The spread has moved a little today. It's up to 8.5. Part of that might be the situation with their QB, Tua. The finger clearly an issue now. Jacoby Brissett's going to take over tonight. And they've got a pretty decent implied total, 19.5, Alex. So I want to start with you. The first thing you saw with the Brissett news, did that alter everything you were doing? Or do you say, okay, this is a guy we have seen this year. We have a pretty good idea of what the Dolphins will look like.
Yeah, usually I would be planning for Tua to start, but because there was some news yesterday that Jacoby Brissett the team was planning with Jacoby Brissett to be the starter. We kind of had an inside scoop, so I didn't change anything because I was kind of expecting Brissett. Now, last week, Brissett had a really miserable performance, so it's hard to get very excited about the idea of him starting, but that was kind of a windy day in Miami. This one is a lot more favorable weather. Still, though, he hasn't really shown us much, so it's hard to see Miami having a lot of success today, but this is football, so anything could happen.
Yeah, Neil, I am one of the sorry people that is holding a Dolphins plus 7.5 ticket out there. I did like them on the short week, and that's more to do with Baltimore than them. But just talking about Brissett specifically, I mean, we've seen him start 5 games. At times, he's looked good, certainly against the Texans. It was not good. The volume was decent, though. He threw the ball 43 times, and he seems to drop back at a good clip. What do you think of him kind of leading the offense tonight?
Yeah, I didn't really know what to make of him going in. So I looked at the Awesemo tools, and the single game tool, he just looks great. He looks positively leveraged. He has had good games. He's going to be throwing a lot. I would expect him to be throwing a lot again today against Baltimore. He's probably going to need to. So I'm going to take chances that, he's not going to look as bad as he did on Sunday against the Texans. I couldn't believe that. I had a ton of Brissett on Sunday. I think he's a good enough player that he can get it done. So I'm going to take some chances there.
Yeah, I was just really, really disappointed. That game altogether on Sunday was a mess in various things with Tyrod and whatnot. And looking at Miami, sometimes they're trailing. Obviously, they're not a great team. They're 2-7. They do throw the ball at a very healthy clip. And if they are trailing here, they're 8.5 point dogs. We could see that once again, Alex. So just let's move from Brissett to obviously the guys that are going to be catching these passes. No Parker, no Fuller. You've got Waddle. Now, Waddle seems to love Tua. They've got the Alabama connection. What do you do with Waddle now? He has so many targets, doesn't rack up a ton of yards, but you got to like that target share.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the kind of guy that can put up a top scoring performance. He should benefit a lot with Devontae Parker continuing to be out. Him and Gesicki have been really the only 2 guys consistently getting that full-time player status on the Dolphins. So you got to feel like he's the top option in the receiving game, closely followed by Gesicki.
We got a super chat related to the Dolphins, Alex. I'll stick with you with this one. Any argument for Preston Williams captain, and then you can basically play everyone? I just want to throw out, I want to ask you, do you worry about dupes in that situation? Because if you take a captain that cheap, you can basically play anyone else around him.
Yeah, Preston Williams, it's interesting because he was a healthy scratch last week, but this week he is playing. So we saw him play 40% of the routes in week 7. In week 5, he played 74%. So that's not the type of workload that I'd like to see. I'm expecting Matt Collins to get more of the work, but to go to the original question, I'm kind of wondering what Preston Williams' ownership is going to come in at, because he hasn't played in a couple of weeks, but he has been decent in the games he has played. So I think he does stand out as one of the better $200 options, just even from a casual glance. So I think I don't think it's going to be as sneaky as you might think because of the reason you said, where to make this lineup work, you basically need to cram in all the other high-priced players. And so everyone who takes that approach is going to have a very similar construction.
Yeah, no doubt. That's my biggest concern. He's going to be a cheapie that you can get to. And Neil, when we look at Waddle, again, the targets have just been absolutely insane. 22 in the past 2 weeks. It's really continued all year. They need to get him the ball, and they do. What do you make of him? And then, feel free to touch upon a guy like Preston Williams, and we'll dig into the rest of the Dolphins pass catchers as well.
Yeah, so Waddle is going to be one of the guys that I'm most over the field on of everybody. Again, he has one of the highest leverage scores on the Awesemo tool. I love guys who just get tons of targets. I mean, they're just the floor is so high there, and then you got to assume if you're getting a lot of targets, you could turn one into a touchdown, and that's all you're really going to need with all those receptions to go along with the touchdown. And his price, he's only 8,200. That's not extremely high for a DraftKings salary. So I really like Waddle today. As far as Preston Williams and Matt Collins, that is a tough situation. It's hard to get a read on it because I believe Preston Williams was a healthy scratch last week. Yep. And this week he's back. So I listened to the show earlier today. Matt Gajewski was saying that he's expecting Matt Collins to still be the number 2. I feel like he has a better read on these situations than I do in general. So I'm going into it with the assumption that Matt Collins is the more likely wide receiver 2 for the Dolphins today. But it is a situation that we really don't know what to expect. So I'm going to have some Preston Williams. Right now I'm even with the field. Projected for 5% ownership. I have 5% Preston Williams. It makes me a little bit uncomfortable. I think I would like to have a little bit more than that and just, hope that he has a bigger role than we're expecting. But, it's really hard to know what to do in that situation. I'm a little bit over the field on Matt Collins for that same reason, just because it's kind of a crapshoot in Miami. We don't really know beyond Waddle and Gesicki. We don't know who are going to be the top receivers, the top targets today. So I was hoping that 1 or 2 of them would be announced inactive, but we weren't so lucky today. So we don't
Definitely,
know.
No doubt about it. There's a lot of unknowns. Neil, I want to stick with you real quick on Matt Collins. He's a guy, he's not getting a ton of ownership. I see around 15% per our tool. Not a popular captain at all. Are you willing to roll the dice there and say, you know what? There's a lot of unknowns here, but if this guy, he either breaks one or he really gets peppered as kind of that second option behind Waddle, he could be in line for an against the grain captain.
Yeah, so I have some shares of Matt Collins at captain. Again, I would say the way to avoid the ownership, because as you're saying, you're more likely to get onto the same roster construction as everybody else if you're using a cheaper guy like that at captain. But again, if you just leave a little bit of salary on the table, and I think you can do that and still come up with a pretty solid lineup. I think he's a solid enough captain play. Looks like I have 1 share of Preston Williams at captain. Similar play, actually. I would probably, if I recrunch, I would probably try to get a few fewer of Matt Collins and a couple more Preston Williams, maybe, because there's so much that we don't know about the situation. I like taking those chances, but again, if you're doing that, I would not use the full salary because you probably will be led on to the same roster construction as everybody else who's making that same play.
I got one more point here too, is that on our Top Showdowns plays tool, which is free today, you can see our chances that each player will be the highest scoring. Preston Williams is at 0.1%, which you might think that's bad, but that's 1 in 1,000, and then there's 134,000 people in the Millie Makers. So if you just operate with the assumption that you're going to be right 1 in 1,000 times, I think leaving money on the table makes sense because of those times, like the chance that if he's the highest scoring player, the chance that you'll get the right combo, it doesn't matter. It change that much if you pick like a 7K guy instead of a 9K guy.
Yeah, you're telling me there's a chance. Always a chance. Is there any other pass catcher? We'll get to Gesicki in a minute, Alex, but I just want to ask you, Neil talked about Matt Collins a little. Dare I bring up like Albert Wilson? I mean, is there anyone else in terms of flyers on the outside that you think for Miami is worth talking about?
So I think Albert Wilson and Isaiah Ford are the ones that are active at wide receiver today, but they're not going to play enough to really be merited in DFS. So I'm looking at the backup tight ends instead, Durham Smythe and Adam Shaheen. both played about 40% of dropbacks last week. So you guys all know tight ends are the key to winning money on Showdown. So I think there's 3 tight ends on Miami you could reasonably put in lineups tonight.
Yeah, and Neil, I don't think I need to tell you that tight ends at times have just been an absolute print fest in some of these single games. Do you look to guys like that in terms of potential punts and salary relief for Miami before we get to Gesicki?
To the tight end punts?
Yeah, kind of the backup tight ends, guys that you really know you're probably drawing to a couple targets, but they could be red zone targets if they happen to score. Easily possible they could be in the optimal.
Yeah, I definitely have shares of Shaheen and Smith. Smythe? Is it Smythe or Smith? Okay. I'm going to go with Smythe. I feel like it's Smythe. I'm going to go with Smythe.
More legit.
Okay.
I think we should go with Smythe.
Yeah. So Gesicki, we're not getting to him yet, but he's one of my top players on the slate. But yes, both Shaheen and Smythe are guys that I like a lot in this slate. I'm going to have, I think, more shares of them on FanDuel currently. I'm probably not going to recrunch. I kept getting less and less as I was trying to get to other players, but I agree that they're all 3 of them are players that you can play in Showdown. And you know that we love playing tight ends in Showdown. So I don't know that I get to all 3 of them in the same lineup, but yeah, I think that they're all definitely in play, more so than most teams in terms of having 3 tight ends that are playable.
So, we've talked about these guys, obviously Waddle. Looking at the prop market just for a second, Waddle's at over under 5.5 receptions, but right below him, Alex, is Gesicki at 4.5, slightly juiced to the under, but clearly we know that this is a guy that Brissett has locked onto. The Ravens have been torched by tight ends at times, and he's just a very good player. His reception yards prop is 51.5. So we could be looking at a healthy total here. Where does Gesicki fit in? Is he a guy that you may look to at captain? And do you think he's a viable play tonight?
Definitely. Yeah, I think he's a great option tonight. I mean, you pretty much know most of the targets are going to go to Waddle and Gesicki, so it's kind of a crapshoot between the 2. Gesicki being a tight end maybe has a small edge in the touchdown department, so that could be one factor. But the main thing that I like about him as far as being a tight end is he actually runs routes on an average of 80% of dropbacks this year, which is very high for the tight end position. 2 weeks ago, he ran routes on 98% of dropbacks, which is phenomenal. So you're getting more opportunities to Gesicki than pretty much every other tight end aside from a handful.
No doubt. And again, they're 8.5-point underdogs. Everything sets up where these guys, they want to pass. They're going to have to pass most likely, barring something really unforeseen. Gesicki seems to check a lot of boxes. But Neil, let's go to the backfield if you're good with that. And Myles Gaskin certainly seems to be consolidating at this point. His rushing yards, 41.5 right now. He certainly can catch the ball as well. Where does he fit in for the Dolphins? Playmakers, is that a guy you think you might get over the field on?
I think I'm going to be a little bit under the field on Gaskin.
Okay.
Just because he's so expensive. He's one of the most negative leverage players in the Awesemo single game tool. I'm a little bit afraid of the Baltimore. I mean, they don't have a dominant defense, but I think they're good enough that I don't expect Miami to be just moving the ball, putting up a ton of points. So typically in those spots, I prefer taking shots on wide receivers than running backs when I'm not expecting there to be a lot of scoring, just because it's less likely, I think, that Myles Gaskin does a ton with one play than it is some of the wide receivers. And especially given his price tag of 9,400 being so much more than the Baltimore running backs who should be in a negative game script. So I'd rather have some of these Baltimore running backs, even though I'm not sure, how it's going to break down with the 3 of them. I think I'd rather be taking shots on the Baltimore running backs than Gaskin, and even Ahmed, just because he is probably going to get more action if they're behind, I would think. I don't know. But yeah, I'm not too high on Gaskin. I'm not way under the field. I'm just a little bit under the field.
Yeah, I mean, clearly a guy, Alex, he's going to see volume. I mean, last game against Houston, he had 20 carries and he had 6 targets, which he caught all of them. Even in games before that, it's a dual threat guy. At one point, they kind of phased him out, but he's clearly returned and seemed to consolidate, with Malcolm Brown being a complete non-factor at this point, of course. So what do you do with Gaskin? Is he a guy, same question really, that you think you're going to be getting to a lot, a little, or maybe just kind of in between?
Yeah, I think Gaskin is a guy I'm playing situationally. He does have that negative leverage, but I have him a lot in lineups with 5 Dolphins, where obviously it's a little bit less likely for the Dolphins to overperform and Baltimore to underperform, but that is a possibility that I'm trying to capture in some lineups. So that's one good way to deploy Gaskin. And he does a lot with receiving and rushing. So I guess you could play him in pretty much any game script, but that's the main one that I'm using him.
Straight onslaught, the 1 in a million onslaught. Yeah, I mean, again, you talked about at the top, the 5-1 can really help limit those dupes and just be a different, especially when it's the underdog. I know it's an unlikely, but say and listen, I talked on the Awesemo odds channel today with Aton about this game from a betting standpoint. If you are interested, you can go check that out over there. And we talked about, Baltimore at times has really struggled, and they've played down to a lot of competition, including Minnesota last week at home. They won that game in overtime. But Alex, I want to stick with you real quick. Neil brought up briefly Ahmed, who is the backup. He's a guy that, he doesn't have the volume that Gaskin's going to see, but do you think he could be a factor in someone as a potential, cheaper option that could be viable tonight?
Definitely, yeah. He's in there a decent amount. In last week's game, he had 16% of the carries and 14% of the dropbacks he ran a route on. So he's somewhat involved, but definitely not someone I'm very optimistic about. So I'm not having Ahmed a lot, but if I did have him, it could be in that onslaught situation. They also have Patrick Laird active for this one, who's been running a few routes. I know he's a favorite of the fantasy community, but that just kind of hurts Ahmed's potential a little bit to not have all those routes.
In terms of lineup construction, Neil, and then we can get to the favorite that everyone wants to talk about, kickers and defense. I assume that you're comfortable in certain lineups, maybe having Gaskins and Ahmed together, just to be a little different. Is that something you're willing to do tonight?
It's actually one of my favorite things to do is to pair up running backs from the same team, just because it's such an easy way to get different, because people are really opposed to doing it. And I don't think that it's as negatively leveraged as the field thinks it is. So yeah, I like having, especially because, oftentimes a team can get up based on one running back doing really well, putting up some points. And then at the end of the game, they'll bring in the second running back to kind of finish out the game. So yeah, I think that it's one of those spots that I like to get different by using a couple running backs from the same team.
All right, let's do it. Neil, we could stick with you here. Where do you go with the kicker? Where do you go with the defense for the Dolphins? Are they just, guys that if you get to them, you get to them? Or is there something you see that maybe they stand out tonight?
I wouldn't say that there's anything that I see that makes them stand out to me. I want to have some of each of them. I'm well under the field on Jason Sanders, which scares me a little bit. It's just kind of how things ended up for me, but they're the underdog. So typically you want the kicker and the defense of the favorite. Yep. So, I have a lot of Justin Tucker, not a lot of Jason Sanders. And then as far as defense go, the one thing that I will say is Lamar Jackson has thrown 7 interceptions in 8 games this year. He's been throwing it a lot more this year. He's had 3 games where he's thrown multiple interceptions. So there's at least a chance that the Dolphins can, have a pick 6, and that's all you really need from a $2,800 defense. So I think there's some merit to playing the Dolphins more so than in years past against Lamar, because he hasn't been too turnover prone in past years. But this year, because he's throwing it a lot more, he's throwing more interceptions, and you can always hope for that on a showdown slate.
Yeah, certainly. If you think the Dolphins, like a lot of teams, the Ravens seemingly fall behind a lot, and Lamar has to bring them back. That's what you want. You want him passing it, obviously trying to make plays. All right, Alex, like I said, I know you're focused on Hollywood and you're a movie star, but your first love was kickers. What are you doing with Sanders? What are you doing with the defense?
Yeah, I think Sanders is probably suboptimal from a projection standpoint. The prop on the field goals is heavily weighted towards under 1.5. So most of the time, he's not going to put up a good enough score to be in the optimal, but I do have him in some onslaughts where you're just kind of assuming Baltimore fizzles out, and he makes sense in that kind of situation. My favorite thing about the kickers is no one likes to play them, so they usually come in at reasonable ownership. But the defense is also appealing for the reasons Neil was saying, where Omar has been known to make a few mistakes. And no one's going to want to take the defense here versus a team that's a big favorite. So I expect that one to be under-owned.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to the books for a second. They have, props on everything these days. Interceptions thrown, 0.5 for Lamar. It is shaded to the under, but it still shows even, like a 40% chance they're saying that he throws one or more picks. And that could be all you need if you have that opportunity for a cheap defense like that. And then just looking, at our projections and our ownership and all the tools, certainly the Dolphins defense is one that, obviously not going to be a popular captain, but they're really not going to be that popular in general tonight because they're expected to lose the game and whatnot. Any final thoughts from either of you guys? Floor is yours on the Dolphins that we haven't covered.
Not for me.
Alex, you good?
Yep.
All right. Before we move to the Ravens, I do want to talk about, and we do this every week, and it's very, very important. It's a fantastic segment, about our friends at No House Advantage. If you guys haven't been over there, it is a site that is offering peer-to-peer type format. So it's a little different, a ton of player props, and they're offering a deposit bonus with the promo code Awesemo. So it's a totally different format. And what you're going to do as we bring it up, you basically go in and you're going to see these players, and they're going to give you different options, and you're just going to project, will they go over or under? So for example, we've got Lamar, and you can go there. They got his passing yards, his rushing yards, his total touchdowns, his interceptions. And you can say, okay, that's my strongest prop. I'm going to put that with my highest point total. I'm going to go over or under the projections. And the great thing about this, Alex, if you could talk about this, we have tools that cater exactly to this. So you can really take advantage of the books.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, their format really lends well to being I mean, their props, like, they don't have odds on the under and over. So
Yeah,
you can
no
really
juice.
get leverage some really high percentage plays. And if other people aren't taking advantage of those, you can have an easy win. So I mean, they have props on the touchdowns. One that I like tonight is Myles Gaskin rushing touchdowns. Now, in a normal book, that would be like plus 300 to hit. But at No House Advantage, you can get even money. So I'd take the under on that, and that's like a free square.
Yeah, Neil. I mean, it's same concept that Alex is talking about. I bring this up. Usually Lofty always says that I say this. Now I can just say it myself. The fact that they don't shade the lines, you can go and compare these. And as Alex is saying, 0.5 touchdowns, that's always a market in the betting market. But they play defense by saying, okay, the under is minus 300. Here, you just have to pick over or under. And I assume that's where you think all the value can be.
Yeah, right. You got to take advantage of the tools. I feel like it's a no-brainer. You just need to use the tools, and if you use them long term, you might lose one day, but over time, you're going to be a winner just following the advice of the tools.
No doubt about it. Again, I think the other thing to realize here, not everyone who's playing No House Advantage are going to use these tools. We do that work for you. You have ample opportunities. I know Alex mentioned the Myles Gaskin one. For me, and this one isn't huge, but I do like Lamar's rushing upside tonight. They have it at just 60.5. The books have shaded that up. In some places, it's up to 68. So you're stealing a bunch of yards there. That can really help. But really, again, all you want to do is check out our projections. Go here, use that deposit bonus. Again, promo code Awesemo. Get some free money and try it out. So No House Advantage. Go and download that and get started and let us know what you think. Moving to the Ravens here. This is a team that, I'll be honest, I don't really know how good they are. At times, they look fantastic. At other times, this is the team they really should have lost to Detroit, who has still no wins when you really think about it, that miraculous field goal. But they are an 8.5-point road favorite here, coming off, again, a somewhat impressive overtime game. But at the same time, at home, I'm not sure you should be in there against a team that just lost to Cooper Rush. They've got a 27.5-point implied total. Neil, let's start with you. Again, I said at the top of the show, when we were talking lineup construction, when you've got Lamar on the slate, it is so different. He's $20,700 at that captain spot. So what do you do with a guy like this, who we know, no matter what, barring something truly fluky, is going to get a lot of opportunity and a lot of production?
Yeah, so I I've said it before. I don't think that there is a wrong way to play Lamar. I mean, you probably don't want to full fade him. Maybe though. I mean, if the ownership is high enough today, the projected ownership is not so high that I would want to full fade him. But I don't think you can go wrong just locking him into the captain spot. I also don't think you can go wrong just locking him into the flex spot. So the way I'm playing it today, I'm following the tools, which they suggest that he's going to be a little bit over owned at captain and a little bit under owned in the flex. So I'm going to have a lot of Lamar Jackson in the flex. I'm not locking him in there. I'm going to have some Lamar captain, but I'm going to have most of my Lamar exposure in the flex and hope that, one of the cheaper guys does well enough that he's even if he's a top scorer, he still is optimal in the flex is what I'm hoping for today.
Yeah. So, I mean, when a guy is that, you mentioned the ownership at captain. Right now, we're projecting upwards of a fourth of the entire field is going to use him at captain. And he's such an expensive captain, Alex, that I assume that dupes immediately become a major issue just because you're funneled. You click him in, you're already down to $5,800 basically for the other 5 spots. There's just not that many permutations, even if you're leaving money on the table. So what do you do when you have a guy that's pushing, he could be 85, 90% owned in some of these tournaments and a very popular captain? How do you approach something like that?
Yeah, I mean, Lamar is a scary fade at captain because we see time and again, he puts up, 30 plus points and he's averaged 27 on the season. So almost half the time that's going to happen. The nice thing about these tools is it really helps you put all the probabilities into perspective. So even though we have him as a 67% chance of being the top scoring player on the slate, that's only going to translate into an 18% optimal rate on DraftKings because of that outrageous salary. So I do prefer maybe going to some less likely options today, captain. Of course, on FanDuel, that goes completely out the window because you don't pay extra for captain. So it's pretty hard to not think he's your best option on FanDuel.
I want to actually dig into that just a second, Alex. So on FanDuel, you mentioned you're not paying the tax of having him. Clearly, he is the most likely highest projected score. But in a game theory standpoint there, do you say, you know what, if he's not, if there's something ridiculous that happens, the amount of people that are going to use him at captain over there is so immense that maybe that's the spot to actually use him in the flex or not even use him at all?
Yeah, I think we're not using him at all as an option, but probably I'm going to have him in the flex more often than not if I don't have him in captain, and just hope that someone else has an outlier performance. So the number one guy on my list would be Jacoby Brissett. I don't think he's going to be popular at MVP on FanDuel because he's been pretty bad, but quarterbacks have a big advantage there compared to other positions relative to DraftKings. So I think Brissett might be your next best option, or you could go that the running backs in Baltimore really overperform and go with a Freeman captain, but then you're starting to dig a little deep.
So, Neil, obviously Lamar, in addition to just being absolutely dominant, and part of it comes from this, he can run. And when he can do that, obviously he can isolate the points. But if he's throwing the ball, he's got a multitude of players here, and one more comes in now. So I want to ask you, when you have a situation where Sammy Watkins is coming in and we really haven't seen him with Rashard Bateman just yet, how do you try to infer what we're going to get? Because we know they've got Hollywood Brown. We'll get to Mark Andrews in a bit. But what are your thoughts on Sammy Watkins kind of returning for this passing game for Baltimore?
I mean, it's like you said, we haven't seen it yet, so I don't think that we really know. So this is a kind of spot where I just kind of let ownership dictate what I'm trying to do. Okay. Typically. Today, unfortunately, we don't have that big of a difference. They're about the same price. They're about the same ownership. So it's kind of a tough spot. I'm coming in slightly over the field on both of them and then coming in slightly under the field on Marquise Brown just because they are not very highly owned. But it's not a place where I really want to take a huge stand because I don't feel like I know. And, it's hard to really differentiate between the two in this spot because we haven't seen them in a game together. We don't know if Rashad Bateman has kind of taken over as number 2 or if that has just been because Watkins has been out. So I'm just kind of splitting the ownership. I'm going to be a little bit over the field on both, hoping for the best.
Yeah. I mean, again, you mentioned total unknown, and what I did with these guys, and I was coming at it from a betting standpoint, I went to Odd Shopper and I pulled up their props, and they're virtually, Sammy Watkins, his receptions prop is over under 2.5, slightly juiced to the over. Bateman's is over under 3.5, really juiced to the under. So again, the books are both saying around 3 catches. The receiving yards prop for both of them, very, very close. So Alex, really same question to you, because I know last week, I believe it's the Sunday show because they were on the Sunday slate. We had talked about Sammy Watkins potentially coming back, then he didn't. Now it looks like, he's been practicing in full. We're going to see him tonight. So what do you think that does to Bateman, and how do you approach the unknown?
Yeah, the tricky part here is Baltimore doesn't typically run 3 wide receivers out on one play. That could change with Watkins coming back, but on the year they've averaged 2.48 wide receivers per drop back running a route. So about 50-50 that WR3 is going to be in there. It's really tough to know how that playing time is going to shake out, but Bateman hasn't. He topped at 82% of routes last week, but the previous 2 weeks he's at 2/3. So I think Sammy Watkins could drop him back down to about 2/3. So it's a little bit of a hit. But beyond that, I mean, it's a little bit of a guessing game to know who's going to get the production.
Do you feel, just sticking with you for a second, Alex, I mean, I think that's clearly the guy, Bateman, he was hurt and then he came back, and now again, Watkins could certainly impact that. What do you think though of Marquise Brown? He's a guy that at times when he catches the ball, which seemingly is rare by the day, he's a very, very explosive player. He's $11,000 in that flex position. Is he someone that maybe you could go to? Obviously compare him with Lamar. What do you think his chances are as maybe a captain tonight and just a play in general?
Yeah, I think Marquise Brown's probably the safest flex option for Baltimore, but I feel like his recent production has been pretty good. On the year, he's averaged 20 fantasy points per game. We only have him at 14 fantasy points projected, so that's telling me that the people that box score watch are going to be on Marquise Brown. That could drive up his ownership a little bit. I don't have a ton of confidence in Baltimore's passing because they are a rush first team, and there's no guarantee that they're going to pass the ball at a very high volume unless Miami does well. So I feel like I'm going to be under the field on Marquise Brown, but mostly because I'm expecting the ownership to be there on him.
Yeah, I think, Neil, everyone is seeing the Sammy Watkins news and immediately thinking, rightfully so, probably, that Bateman's a lot scarier, but Hollywood Brown might be above that. So do you, I know you mentioned him briefly before, but just to bring it back before we talk about Andrews and some of these other guys, what do you make of what probably is going to be Lamar's favorite receiver tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to be a little bit under the field just because he's so expensive. I think the field is probably going to be overconfident in Marquise Brown's status. I mean, last week against the Vikings, he was mega chalk and he didn't really do it in the first 4 quarters. Then, of course, in overtime, he went off. So he got there. But I think that's just going to lend to him being overowned because people see how well he did. They had him in their lineups as mega chalk. So that's one of the places that I'm getting under on him and getting over on the guys that people are a little bit more afraid to play, like Bateman and Watkins.
So sticking with you, Neil, yeah, I mean, Hollywood Brown, he has been really busy, 26 targets in those last 2 games, but Mark Andrews is the other guy, big time playmaker. He had a little slow start of the season, then he heated up. He's just a very, very good player. He's a pretty quality $2,200 difference in price. So where does he fit in? Is he another guy that you're looking to maybe get overweight on? Or are you just neutral? What do you do with the tight end for the Ravens?
So I am well under the field on Mark Andrews. That's not something that I was intentionally trying to do. It's just a product of me trying to get more of other players. So I knew that I wanted to have a lot of Gesicki just based on the tools. Really loved Gesicki. My expectation is that Miami is going to get behind and have to throw a little bit more. Gesicki is $1,400 less and only a little bit higher in ownership. So I think that I ended up getting less Andrews because I am targeting more Gesicki and then also those secondary, tertiary tight ends on both teams kind of led me a little bit away from Andrews, but not because I think it's a bad play, just because it's not my favorite play. And if it's not my favorite play, I'm going to end up dampening my ownership as I try to get to other players.
Mm-hmm. Alex, when you look at Andrews, I mean, again, we know that this guy at times can be, I mean, it's a red zone threat, super talented. Lamar looks at him. He's got a lot of weapons now with these guys coming back, but it's hard to imagine that Andrews still won't be somewhat busy. And even looking at the prop market, 4.5 receptions is the line right now on him, 50.5 yards. So pretty healthy totals. What do you do with him? Again, kind of that same question.
Yeah, I feel like Andrews is another guy in the same category as Brown, where the production's kind of exceeded our expectations of him because Baltimore is more of a rush first team. Lamar's averaged like 275 yards passing this year, but a lot of it's been game script, and they've had at least one overtime game last week. I can't remember if there was more, but I think maybe. So I think a lot of people are going to be playing Lamar and the passing stack for the Ravens. And I'm kind of trying to leverage against that by playing for more game scripts where they run the ball a lot or they get smoked by the Dolphins. Unlikely, but I mean, there's a reasonable chance of that.
And Alex, just stating, you guys have both mentioned, and it's great because it's one of our free tools tonight, that top plays, one of the most valuable, showdown tools that we have. Alex, can you just briefly explain for people maybe going there for the first time, what they're going to see and why that can be a really useful resource?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's easy to kind of figure out the number of fantasy points a guy is going to get on the slate on average, but then translating that into the right plays is a lot tougher. So what we're doing is we're using simulations to solve that problem, just running through the slate a bunch of times with random outcomes. And we're generating the probabilities each player is going to be the highest scoring and or be one of the second through sixth highest scoring so that they would be one of the top flex players. And then we also have optimal line percentages for each player that kind of show, based on the salary cap, how that would shake out to actual lineups. So there's a lot of data there that you can kind of use to make some game theory plays about who's over-owned, who's under-owned, and what the lineup comp is going to work on today's slate.
Yeah, definitely would advise people checking that out. One of the many resources we have from Alex and the entire team. These guys use it each and every slate to honestly do some dangerous things with those lineups. So go check that out. Totally free today. Neil, let's go to the backfield. So Lat Murray is still injured. You've got Devontae Freeman, Le'Veon Bell, Williams is still there. I don't know. Patrick, who knows what the Ravens are going to do? It seems like they've got unlimited backs. When you think about, Gus Edwards getting hurt literally feels like 5 years ago. I forgot he was even on the team, but focusing on tonight for a second, I mean, you think it's Freeman's backfield, some type of timeshare, and then how does that translate to your lineups tonight?
Yeah, so I think Freeman probably is the one who's going to get the most carries or get the first shot at it at least. But that doesn't give me a ton of confidence that he's going to end up as the most useful running back. I don't know what to make of. So Tyson Williams is the one that I find really interesting, and I'm currently highest over the field on him. I have about the same ownership of all three of them, a little bit less on Le'Veon Bell than the other two. But what's interesting about Tyson Williams is he was active against the Vikings and didn't get a single touch, which I think it could happen again. I mean, it could definitely happen again, and that is a huge risk, and I think it's going to scare a lot of people away. My hope is that teams go into a game on Sunday when they have another game on Thursday. They know they have a game coming on Thursday. And sometimes I think we read a little bit too much what happened on Sunday when making lineups for Thursday. We don't factor in that maybe they, we're saving him for tonight. I mean, I don't know that he's going to get a huge workload, but they may have wanted to, they also may have just not gotten around to using him. But I don't know. I still think that he is their most talented running back. I'm kind of tripping over my words because I don't know what to say about these running backs. No, I'm willing to take a shot on him because, I think that it's possible that they are going to go into the game with a different plan on Thursday, knowing that they now have a long break before the next game, as opposed to, you know, a 4 days between games. So I'm gonna play about an even split of all three of them. Le'Veon Bell is gonna fall by the wayside a little bit. I'm gonna have a little bit less Le'Veon Bell than Freeman and Tyson Williams, but it is kind of a crapshoot. I don't really know what to make of the backfield here.
I hear you, because I think a lot of people see this, and I certainly do. I think he's their best back too, but it seems like they don't. And obviously, at the end of the day, you know what Harbaugh and co do is what's going to go. Now, it is a short turnaround, and in the last game, you know, Lamar took a heavy workload. He had 21 carries himself for $120. They were trailing throughout. If they dominate this game, you could see more volume for all these guys, Alex, and that's really what I want to go to, because you have three backs. Certainly, Le'Veon Bell at times can be used in all of them, you know, if they want to target them, but they don't seem super prevalent to do that. And then you've got Lamar as obviously a guy who could vulture and take carries. So what do you do with a backfield that's this crowded?
Yeah, so I just look at the workload from last week. I mean, I look at several weeks, but last week is particularly interesting, where Tyson Williams did play, but he only ran routes. He didn't get any carries. I mean, he's probably third in line. Le'Veon Bell got mostly carries, but ran a few routes. But Devonta Freeman kind of had both, where he ran routes on 56% of Lamar dropbacks, and then he had 29% of the carries. So he was tops in both, and in routes by a lot over the other running backs. So I feel really iffy about, you know, there being three running backs, but I feel like based on that, he's clearly number one. And I like running back from a game theory perspective today for Baltimore, where if you just play that Baltimore is going to win by a lot, then the running backs are probably going to overperform. You can throw in the kicker and defense, and you have a decent lineup.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing with, and again, on the Awesemo Odds channel, I talked about this a lot. It seems like to me that Lamar, and this happens with a lot of quarterbacks, he really puts up the rushing upside when they're losing or they need it. If they cover this spread, I actually think you're going to see Lamar sub 10 carries, and these running backs do the heavy lifting. So Alex, sticking with you for a second, you know, Neil said that he really likes to target this strategy of maybe pairing up a couple of backs because the field maybe, you know, overrates how damaging it is to your lineups. Will you do that maybe with some of the Baltimore backs, have some Freeman and Bell, or Williams and Bell, what Williams and Freeman permutations?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable idea. I do have a lot more Freeman than I do Bell or Tyson Williams, but you know, I think that either one is fine. There's a pretty big salary difference between the two. Tyson Williams is 1,200, while Bell is 5.5K, it looks like about. So given that both have pretty meager workloads, I feel like Bell is a worse play relative to the salaries. So I don't really love Tyson Williams, but as far as a punt, he's not bad.
Neil, looking at you, you know, you mentioned rightfully so kickers for a team that's almost a 10-point dog. That's a tough situation because their implied total is much lower. Now, the Ravens have the super kicker. They give him opportunities that other guys wouldn't get. They certainly rely on him. And why wouldn't you? Justin Tucker is unbelievable. So he's $4,000. Any thoughts on where he fits in, or is he just one of those mid-range plays that if you land on him, so be it?
Yeah, so I really like Justin Tucker here. I feel like this is a spot. I mean, Alex was saying how much he loves kickers. We know Alex loves kickers, and I, you know, try to follow Alex's advice generally. And the tools love Justin Tucker, so we have an extra reason to play Justin Tucker today. He's maybe the best kicker in the game, one of the best kickers in the game. He has a positive leverage score. This is one of the rare places where I was kind of actively trying to get above the field on Justin Tucker. I could see him putting up a lot of points today.
No, I mean, yeah, absolutely. If they stall in the red zone a couple of times, you know, that's all you need with a guy like that. And he's got the range. Our friend Jordan Lockhart gracing us with a super chat. Much appreciated as always, brother. I know he's been on the heater of all heaters, and we hope that continues. Let's see some Awesemo logos tied for first tonight. I could live with that as long as it's not like 100 Awesemo logos. We don't want that, but maybe just a handful of us up top. sticking with you for a second, Neil, and then Alex, of course, I want to get your thoughts on Tucker. What do you make of the Ravens defense? Now, the Dolphins pass at a really high clip. You've got Brissett back there. I think more people will target them and want to go to the Ravens defense, but do you think you will get over on what could be, 20-ish% ownership?
I'm going to be under the field on 20% ownership.
Okay.
I think it's a fine play. I like the Ravens defense in this spot against Jacoby Brissett. We saw if he was that bad against the Texans, he can certainly be that bad against the Ravens. So I think it's a solid play. There's just other spots that I'd rather get different. They're, somewhat chalky for a defense, not crazy chalky. So, I don't hate it, but they are 4,400, the 1,600 more than the Dolphins defense. You need them to put up some points. They either need to have, they need to score a touchdown, or they need to have a lot of turnovers, a lot of sacks to pay off the 4,400 price tag. So I think they're a fine play, but I'm going to be just a little bit under the field on the Ravens.
So Alex, again, Justin Tucker, Neil just talked about him. The guy is just fantastic. They are pretty heavy favorites at home. What do you do with him? And then again, the Ravens defense, Brissett, I don't think it's crazy to think he drops back upwards of 40 plus times tonight. That's a lot of opportunities for a defense to make a pick or two.
That's a good point. All the scoring on defense pretty much occurs on passing plays. So you really want a defense facing a passing offense with the sacks and interceptions. So I think the Ravens defense is in a better than average spot for defense. Probably going to be pretty popular tonight because Brissett is kind of not been successful this year. And I think the Ravens defense is a strong play, especially in an onslaught where you're kind of building your lineup around that game script. And Tucker as well, a good play more often than not. Baltimore is going to have 2 or more field goals. So that's putting him in the 9-point range if that happens. And he's averaged 10 points so far this year. So when you pick one of these guys, it's really a bet against the punt plays. And the punt plays today are guys like Adam Shaheen, Tyson Williams. You have Preston Williams. So these are guys that are really kind of dart throws. So the chance that the kicker defense is optimal as opposed to those guys is pretty high in my opinion.
Yeah, again, I think that's where it comes down to how you're kind of constructing these lineups. Alex, I want to ask you real quick, and then don't worry, we got plenty of time to build a lineup. We're going to get a little dangerous with lineup building tonight. One guy we didn't mention, and he was starting to carve out a pretty good role on this Ravens offense, is Duvernay. He was another guy that he can do some things. They get him involved. Do you think he really takes a hit if Watkins is back, or do you think he'll still have some of those opportunities for maybe a couple targets tonight?
He has opportunities, but yeah, I think he takes a big hit with these guys back, or Watkins back, and Bateman has been back a few weeks. But in the last 3 weeks where Bateman has been active, Duvernay has averaged about 50% of dropbacks being on the field. Now you have Watkins coming in for a lot of plays. That's going to really reduce Duvernay's workload. So don't love that, but I guess it comes down to the ownership and the price. I'm assuming he's not super cheap tonight, given that he had been playing a decent amount.
He's not. That's a thing. It's like one of those things, Neil. It's from game theory standpoint, I almost like it because it's like I'm looking for him to get lucky and break one of those targets, and then price really not going to matter a ton. But at the same time, you're crippling your lineups if you play him and he doesn't do that, because you're not paying $200 for him. You're paying basically $5,000.
Yeah. So I play 150 lineups, so I'm okay crippling some of my lineups. I probably wouldn't get to him if I was playing 10 lineups because he is one of the weaker plays from just a pure football, what you're expecting from him perspective. But he, at the time I was doing my lineups, he was projected for 1.5% ownership. I think that's come up a little bit. But at 1.5% ownership, he's the kind of player that I like to take some shots on just because that 4,800 is too expensive for him. But that drives people away. And really, all it would take is maybe a 30-yard touchdown would be enough to pay off that salary, most likely in this game, which isn't that unlikely. It's probably more likely than 1.5% chance. So I'm taking some shots on Duvernay. I'm not super comfortable with it. I understand that I am very likely just punting those lineups, but in the chance that it hits, then I'm going to be above the field. I'm going to have a great opportunity if Duvernay does do something in this game with his minimal opportunities.
Speaking of potentially burning lineups, Alex, we got a super chat from Brad here. Is Josh Oliver viable as a punt with Boyle and Ag? Another tight end that we really know nothing about. Do you think you can say, you know what, that's a YOLO type play, or is that just a punt that maybe you don't want to touch?
Yeah, thanks, Brad, for the super chat. I think who's this guy again? Josh Oliver?
Yeah, that's the question everyone's asking.
I'm just kidding. I was thinking Nick Boyle might come back for this one, but he's inactive tonight. So you have Josh Oliver as the tight end too in Baltimore. That's equal to about 1 in 5 plays, him running a route. Not very good, but as a millionaire maker dart, Josh Oliver is viable. I wouldn't play him in anything else.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's one of those very, very tough, narrow window. But if you're on the field at all, you always can make a small case. I think that's towards the bottom where I get, all right, I think it's time. We got about 1,500 people in here doing real good work. We're going to ask for some likes before we build this lineup. No doubt. I think we can push that up. I know after the show, I'm going to have to go face the music from Lofty, and he's going to ask me. First thing he's going to ask me is how many likes did we get? So I don't want to come back totally humiliated there. Twisted Reality Gaming. Thoughts on MVP Lamar? I assume that's a FanDuel question.
FanDuel, yep.
Yeah. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think that lineup. So he has Lamar, Andrews, and Brown. So really banking on the passing game. With Tucker, that's a solid combo. Hollins is the Miami run back. I mean, I don't feel great about Hollins tonight, but he's going to be out there a lot. So I think if that's what you have money for, like, this meets the criteria of having a distinct game flow that it pays off. So I like that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think Lamar up there, just onslaught style. All right, I'm ready to do this. Neil, you are the guest, so you're going to get the first pick. We're going to build a DraftKings lineup here. We'll be ready to go. Floor is yours. Who do you want to put in that captain spot?
I say let's try Gesicki in the captain spot. Get a little bit different.
All right, good. Gesicki, obviously, really solid play. I think we'd all agree there. Alex, go ahead. Who are we attaching?
Okay, so Gesicki, I think Brissett, if we have Gesicki captain, is a must play.
Yep, no doubt about it. So for me, let's see. What do I want to do here? Should I just coffin us with Lamar? I think there's enough cheap that we can do that. And realistically, I think if you can almost leverage Lamar by putting him in the flex, and you just hope for that middling game where he doesn't destroy us, Neil, but he does enough where obviously he's still raw points, probably going to get there. So let's put in Lamar. I've left you guys not great, but you got 5,000 still to navigate.
5,000 per player. Who's up?
You're up. We're not going to do snake style. I'll see what we're doing. So yeah, fourth player in the lineup.
All right. I am going to go to, I think I'll go to Mac Hollins. Just hope that he is a wide receiver too for the Dolphins and that throwing a lot. He's not too expensive. He's a little bit under that 5,000 tag. So let's take a shot on Mac Hollins.
I like it. All right. So we've got Gesicki at captain, Brissett, and then another pass catcher for him and Mac Hollins, and then Lamar, Alex. So we got 2 spots left, 55-ish. What do you want to
do? Okay. I think going a little bit of an onslaught strategy here could be a good idea. So I think Sanders, the kicker, just as far as the line construction play, makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is clearly, if you're looking at this lineup, what we're kind of saying is that Miami, maybe they always take a pass-heavy approach and it's working. And then we're hoping, at least what I would hope here, is that Lamar takes it upon himself mostly to get there with rushing upside. He had 120 yards rushing against the Vikings. If he does something like that, I think we could see it. And I'm going to end here. I'm actually going to put in, just to be a little different, I'm going to put in Devontae Freeman and hope that actually maybe the opposite happens. Maybe the Ravens are just dominating them on the ground, and you've got Jackson and Freeman doing a lot of work, and Brissett has to bring them back with, say, 50-plus attempts. Gesicki gets there. Hollins gets there. Your boy Sanders is kicking 70-yard field goals for us. I like that. We leave a little money on the table. Neil, you good with this lineup?
Love it. Yeah.
All right. We've done some good things here. Got about 5 minutes left, and I do want to dive in to the betting side of it because, again, this is a way, we talked about this throughout the show, where you can really navigate and get some insight into what Vegas projects and just where these totals are coming from for some players. So looking at OddsShopper and going over there, Alex and the team have done an amazing job. If you haven't been there, oddshopper.com, check it out. A lot of opportunities there on the betting side and just comparing some DFS things. So Alex, we'll start with you. Is there a prop tonight that you feel good? It's not a 13 player prop millionaire venture, just one prop for us that you feel pretty good about tonight.
Yeah, I have a couple. My favorite one, this one's kind of random, but that's why you can get a huge edge is these books have so many different bets out there. They can't keep track of them all, but Salvin Ahmed under 10.5 receiving yards. So what I'm seeing here, he only ran routes on 14% of dropbacks last week and 17% the week before. Patrick Laird has been the change of pace receiving back. So I feel like more often than not, Ahmed is going to get 0 or 1 catches. So I think the best way to leverage that is the under on receiving yards. Yeah,
that's one of our highest expected ROIs out there. You've mentioned that this guy has been somewhat phased out at times, and that the weirder honestly, a general rule of thumb, truly, the more obscure guy, probably the more efficient the lines are from the books. So you can take advantage of some weird guys like that if they have lines out there. Neil, are you going create a player like Alex, or are you going to one of the stars on the slate for your favorite bet?
Yeah, I'm going to one of the stars. I'm going the opposite approach. I hated seeing that, by the way, the Salvin Ahmed, because I was trying to get to a lot of him. I'm re-crunching right now to get less after seeing that. No, I like Lamar Jackson over 18.5 completions. We've got him projected for 20.3 completions, 16% expected ROI, 66% win rate for Lamar Jackson over 18.5 completions. That was one of my favorites that I found on OddsShopper.
Yeah, I mean, those completion ones, I've actually really been taking advantage of as well. And I'm going to kind of piggyback what you're saying there. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to go to the other side. You look at Jacoby Brissett, who clearly was not someone that I was worried about props or even playing tonight, but suddenly he pops up over under 20.5 completions. I'm going over. We lean over as well. I like that. And it's really just a volume issue. This is a guy, again, in his 5 starts, he threw the ball 30 times against Indy. After that, though, 39 or more times. He's been in the 40s a couple times, almost had 50 against the Raiders. If you're going to tell me that he's only needs to complete around 50% of his passes, I am definitely going to lean over there. So I like that one. It just popped up on the boards because of the injury, of course, to Tua. So go to OddsShopper and check that out. We're going to have some really fun things. The last thing I want to say about this, we've been seeing fantastic screenshots from the DFS world, and we want them to keep coming. But if you hit a good parlay and you're doing some good things, hit us up at JazzRazDFS, at Awesemo DFS, at PlayerQDFS, as well as the Awesemo Odds Twitter handle. We want to know about if you're winning some bets out there. Tag us. We'd love the support. We want to give you guys your current shout out. Alex, any final thoughts here as we wrap up what should be a very interesting Thursday night game?
Yeah, definitely. I think this one definitely more interesting from a DFS standpoint than maybe watching the game, in my opinion. But that's why we play is to get a little skin in it. But yeah, just good luck to everyone. And if you have a big night, it's always great to see that. So make sure to let us know.
No doubt about it. Thanks to you guys for hopping on. Neil, pleasure as always. Thanks for joining us. Tyler behind the glass, great job as always. Good luck, my friends in chat. Someone take something down and let us know about it. We're going to bounce on out of here. Good luck. Enjoy the game. See you guys next week.